In this video, we will review adding and subtracting basic fractions. So the main rule that we want to remember is that in order to add or subtract fractions, the bottoms of the fractions, which we call the denominator, must be the same. Here we have an example where we have half a pizza and we want to add it to 1/4 of a pizza or 1/4 of a pizza, but we can see that our denominators are different, so they cannot be added. We have a denominator of 2 on this fraction, and we have a denominator of 4. But the process of aligning those denominators is pretty easy. We know that we can make this 2 a 4 by multiplying by 2. So if we also multiply the top by 2, we can turn this into a fraction that we can add to 1/4. 1 times 2 would be 2, and 2 times 2 is 4. So 1/2 is the same as 2/4, and now we can add that to 1/4. We add the tops. 1 plus 2 is 3, and we don't add the bottom. We just leave the denominator alone. And that gives us an answer of 3/4. And hopefully you could see that if we combined these pictures and we move this piece over here, that would be 3/4 of a pizza. So that makes a lot of sense. All right, so let's talk about mixed numbers a little bit. With mixed numbers, we want to add or subtract the whole number part of the fraction or the mixed number and the fractions separately, and then combine. So here we've adjusted this example so that we have 1 1/2 pizza on the left, and we have 2 1/8 pizza on the right. We want to add those two together to see how much pizza we have altogether. Once again, we still need to align the denominators of these fractions before we can add them. In order to make 2 an 8, we would multiply by 4. So we'd also need to multiply the top by 4. So 1 times 4 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. So we could say that that is also 1 4/8 pizza. Makes sense because there's 1, 2, 3, 4 slices when it's divided into 8. Now we'll add the whole numbers together. 1 plus 2. We have 3 whole pizzas. 1, 2, 3. Visually, we can see that. And now we add the fractions. 4 plus 1 is 5. And we don't add the bottom. We don't add 8 and 8. We just leave that eighths. 3 5/8 of a pizza would be our answer. Remember to try to reduce fractions. Fractions have what's called a lowest form, and we want to make sure that we find that lowest form. Here's some examples. 6/8 is not the lowest form of this fraction because both the top and the bottom can be divided by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 divided by 2 is 4. That 6/8 is equivalent to 3/4, but 3/4 is a much better answer. That is the lowest form of that fraction. 12/16. We can also divide that by 2. That's usually a good place to start. Divide both the top and the bottom by 2. That gives us 6/8. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 16 divided by 2 is 8. And notice that that's the same as this fraction over here. So we know that that is also equivalent to 3/4, dividing both the top and the bottom by 2. All right, let's make an example here. We need to make the top and the denominators the same, and then add the numerators. 1/8 plus 1/16. Well, we can make 8 into 16 by multiplying the top and the bottom by 2. That changes our problem to look like this. 2/16 plus 1 over 16. We add the tops, 3 over 16. Notice that the bottom of the fraction did not change. Let's look at another one. 4/5 minus 1/10. The bottoms or the denominators are not the same, but we can turn a 5 into a 10 by multiplying by 2. That is a common adjustment, but remember, we also have to multiply the top of that fraction by 2. That will give us 8 over 10 minus 1 over 10. Now that the denominators are the same, we can do the math. 8 minus 1, subtract the numerators, and we leave the denominator alone. The answer to that would be 7/10. As is always the case, feel free to pause this video if you want to review this again. 3 over 9 plus 1 over 3. We need to make this 3 a 9. What would do that? Well, in this case, multiplying by 3 would do that. That's going to turn our problem into 3 over 9 plus 3 over 9. That looks interesting. We have the same fraction being added to itself, but we do the same thing. 3 plus 3 is 6, and we have 9 on the bottom. But now this looks like a fraction that we might be able to reduce. We can't divide both the top and the bottom by 2, but we can divide both the top and the bottom by 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 9 divided by 3 is 3. And that would be our final answer, 2/3. All right, let's look at some examples now with mixed numbers. We want to remember to handle the whole number part and the fraction separately. 1 3/8 plus 3 1/8. Our denominators are the same, so we don't need to make an adjustment here. We can start out by adding the whole numbers. 1 plus 3 is 4. And 3 plus 1, the top of our fraction, is 4. Our denominator stays the same. We want to always challenge ourselves to try to reduce this fraction if we can. Now, when you do this a few times, you start to become aware that 4/8 is the same as 1/2. We could get there by dividing both the top and the bottom of that fraction by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 8 divided by 4 is 2. The answer to that is 4 1/2. Next problem. 3 4/5 minus, this is a subtraction problem, 2 1/5. Let's start out with the whole numbers. 3 minus 2, that's just 1. We also have a common denominator here, so we don't have to make an adjustment. 4 minus 1 is 3, and our denominator stays the same, 1 3/5. Last problem, 3 7/8 plus 2/8. There's no whole number in this part. So we're basically adding 3 to 0. So our whole number part of that would be just 3. 7/8 plus 2/8. Again, we have common denominators here. So we're adding 7 to 2, and we get 9 8/8. Now, this is a little bit different. This is what's called an improper fraction. The numerator is larger than the denominator. That means that this number is larger than 1. So it really means this is the same as 3 8/8. I should say plus 1/8 is left over. 8 over 8 is just the number 1. So that means we have a whole unit that can be added to the 3. So it's going to be 4 1/8 would be our final answer to that question. All right, hopefully that's a quick review for you of how to add and subtract fractions. Your calculator will do this extremely well, but for some problems, you won't be allowed to use a calculator, and you will need to know how to add and subtract basic fractions by hand. So hopefully this was helpful. Now it's time for some practice.